Hey there YouTube, this is Michael with Zenotech Tutorials again. This week I'm going to be going over implementing directory synchronization. There are a few options in the portal that aren't really all that necessary. There are a few things such as enabling directory synchronization that you can go through over here, but once you go through and you actually turn on directory synchronization from the server, it does all of this for you. This basically just asks you certain questions about how big is your organization, and things like that to see if directory synchronization is right for you. But at this point, we're basically assuming that whether you're testing this or whether this is for production, this is what you want to do. Just a side note, over 100,000 objects being synchronized, not just users, but objects in general, you do need a separate instance of a SQL server. Otherwise, the Azure AD Connect wizard, which is the newest sync tool, will install SQLite on whatever server you're doing this on. In the past, this could not be ran on a domain controller. However, with a lot of the changes now, it can. It can really be run on any server. The amount of resources that it uses is minimal, so you're really not going to notice too much of an impact. So I have this server set up. This is a 2012 R2 data center server that I set up through Azure. I'm not going to go over the actual Azure setup, maybe a different video series down the road. But either way, I'm going to go through installing the Azure AD Connect tool. I'm not going to download it from the portal. I'm going to use the direct link for it, which I'll be putting in the description so you guys have easy access to it. Sorry about that. So going ahead and getting this tool, basic system requirements, I'll go over those as soon as this comes up here. But once again, you can also see those when you actually go and install the tool itself. This might give me a IE security. There we go. Okay. So basic system requirements for this, server 2008, 2008 R2, 2012 or 2012 R2. Pretty basic there, and there's really not much in the way of software requirements or anything like that for it, or system requirements. Like I said, it's a pretty light tool. So I'm gonna go ahead and run this. It's gonna go through this. It's gonna do the IE security scan, which hopefully doesn't take too long to run through. But once this goes, basically, this will either be very quick or it will take a while to sync, obviously just depending on how many objects you have to synchronize. I'm going to go through and show you the filtering on this as well. I'm going to be showing you basic domain-based filtering, which is pretty easy, and then I'll be showing you OU-based filtering. Admittedly, I'm not all that great with attribute and user-based filtering, so I'm not going to go over that in this video, but I am going to put some information in the description for you guys to go over if you do want to do that. So, and I'm going to show you where the filtering is on the initial setup, as well as how to edit the filtering post-installation. So let's take a look at the Azure AD Connect setup. So this is just some basic information. You can do password synchronization or ADFS. I'm actually going to do ADFS next week. This week I'm just going to do basic password synchronization. With ADFS, you do need additional servers to set up, which I will create before next week's video. So I'm going to go ahead and agree to the arbitrary license and conditions. And these are the express settings here. Configure synchronization of identities. And it does password sync and does the initial sync for you. But I'm going to go through the customize option so you can actually see everything that's in here. So once again, I mentioned that there is a SQL server. If you have over 100,000 users, it's necessary. You can use it for under 100,000 users. It's just a matter of when it's actually necessary. Custom install location if you want to. Custom sync groups, which we're not really going to go over now. And existing service account. When I do the service accounts, you can use whatever account you want. Just make sure that it is a password that does not expire, because this is going to be the account used for the Windows service. And if a password expires on a Windows service, changing that password won't fix it. You actually need to reinstall the product with a valid credentials set. So make sure this is a password that is not going to expire unless you want to have to reinstall this down the road. So now this is going to take a few minutes to install the sign-in assistant. There's a PowerShell module, some C++ information it has to install, and there's the SQL Express that I was talking about earlier. I'm actually going to pause the video just for a second while this runs, and I will resume as soon as this finishes. Okay, so once the installation is complete, we come to the user sign-in. There's password synchronization, federation with ADFS, which, like I said, is going to be next week, and do not configure. Basically, do not configure would put you in a scenario where even if users set the same passwords, they're going to have a different set of credentials, a different set of expiration dates of their on-premise credentials compared to what's in 365. If you do password sync or ADFS, at that point, the cloud settings for password expiration don't come into effect at all, and it just relies on whatever you have set on premise. So I'm going to do password synchronization here, and Azure AD is the same thing as your Office 365 credentials. Okay, so it's going to go ahead and connect, verify credentials, and it's going to go over the domains that I have on my tenant, which is just the michaelazure.com. So now this is going to ask me to connect my on-premise directories. If you have more than one here, then what you do is, if you have different directories, then you just go ahead and you just continue to add more in these fields. So I'm going to go ahead and hit next, and it's going to pull the schema for my on-prem. Shouldn't take any more than a couple seconds. Okay, so it sees that this is the domain that I have in Azure AD. It's verified, that's all set, and it's basically asking me which attribute I want the Azure AD username to be. Like I mentioned before, when you look in the username field in Office 365, over here, it's basically asking me what attribute through Azure or through my on-premise that I want to translate into this. And you can basically pick any attribute that you want out of the list. I'm going to leave it as the user principal name attribute. So hit next here, and here I'm going to leave it as sync all domain to no use. I can show you the filtering later on. But basically, if I do sync selected domain to no use, the different domains would just appear here. You know, if I had michaelazure2.com, michaelazure3, etc., those would just appear down the list. So I can expand this, and then I can check off the OUs and the sub-OUs that I want to sync. Anything that is checked off will be syncing. If it's not, then it will not sync. So the only group that I actually have something in that I care about is the O365 users. But like I said, I'm going to sync everything and then show you filtering later on. Uniquely identifying users, you'd only really change these options if you have multiple forests in AD, multiple exchange orgs, and you have linked mailboxes and things like that where you have users across multiple directories. But I just have the one, so I'm going to leave it like this. And the source anchor is the object GUID. That should stay how it is as well. Filtering, I never change this even in the filtering later on. This will pretty much stay. And optional features. So password synchronization, I selected by default, so I can't change that. Password writeback is if you have the Azure Active Directory premium licenses and they're assigned to the users. Basically what that means in a password sync scenario is that a user can go through the portal and reset their password, and it will actually reset their password on-prem as well. Up to you if you want that or not, obviously. And the Exchange Hybrid deployment, I can't check that off right now because I don't have any servers in this domain, in this forest, to have Exchange servers. But basically, there's a particular attribute that gets stamped when you do Exchange Hybrid deployment, which I will cover in a later video. But in order to do a proper Office 365 hybrid with Exchange 2010 or 2013 and move mailboxes, that does have to be checked off. So we're going to go ahead here, and I'm going to have it start the synchronization process when it completes, because you see if I don't do that, then it's going to actually disable the service itself. Staging mode is if basically you want to have a failover Azure AD Connect server, because you can't have two servers running at the same time syncing users and attributes into Office 365. So I can set it into staging mode. So if I have another server and that one goes down, or I'm switching over, or whatever the scenario is, I can go right in here and I can disable staging mode and actually run the synchronization instead of having to go ahead and install this whole thing again. So this shouldn't take an incredibly long amount of time. It does take a little bit longer if you're doing anything in terms of ADFS. For obvious reasons, it has to configure that as well. I'm going to leave this about 30 seconds here. If this does not finish in that time, then I'm going to pause the video again and restart it when it's finished. Now, once we do this, there's going to be a tool called the Synchronization Service client that's actually going to be where we manage everything. I'm also going to show you how to run the synchronizations through the GUI interface, through the synchronization service, as well as through PowerShell if need be. There is a PowerShell module called the ADSync module, I believe it's called, that gets installed when you're doing this. I'm going to give this about another 10 seconds or so, and then I'm going to pause it if it doesn't finish. All right, I'm going to go ahead and pause this. I will be right. Okay, so once the installation is complete, you'll hit this screen, configuration complete, and you can check Office 365, and then it gives you information about Windows 10 computers. So I'm going to exit out of that, and you want to go ahead, and I've already pinned this to the taskbar, but you want to go ahead and search for the Synchronization Service. And I always pin it to my taskbar because I know I'll forget about it and not know where it is 5 minutes later. So these will go ahead and run, and this will be a pretty quick process, considering I only had one real user and then a handful of group faces that it's going to sync. So you'll see that it does 2 full imports on the local connector, the Office 365 connector, 2 full synchronizations on the local and the 365 connector, and then actually just exports on the Office 365 and then the local connector. Those are the full imports. Once it does that, every 30 minutes it will do a delta synchronization, basically just looking for changes instead of resynchronizing everything. So taking a look, I'm going to go ahead and bring up my Office 365 tenant here in a second, and I'm going to show you what the users look like. So I go to users and active users over here, and I have my default admin account, my account from on-prem that got synchronized. Remember, that was in the O365 the O365 users OU. And this is a service account that gets created. Leave that one there. I've broken things removing that one before. I will go over how to remove it later on, because if you notice, I can't just, if I try to delete the user, it's not going to let me because it's synchronized with Active Directory. There's 3 ways to delete a user being synchronized with Active Directory, 2 of which are permanent solutions, 1 of which is a temporary solution. You can take the user out of the OU that's being synchronized, and in which case the next Delta Sync will remove it. You can, as a drastic measure, if you don't have any more need for it, you can delete the user out of the on-premise Active Directory, or you can use some of the commands I went over last week, the remove-msol user commands. Those will overwrite the directory synchronization and remove the user, but that one's a temporary solution because on the next sync, it will just come back. I see that used, say you create a new user, for whatever reason there's issues with it, and you just want to scrap the user and rebuild it. That would be the best way to do it. So let's go ahead and take a look back at this over here. So I can go ahead and I can actually go ahead and run these synchronizations themselves through this, or what I can do is I can just right click, run, and see it's already it was already gray selected on the full import for each one. So now there's also a way that you can do it in PowerShell. Because obviously you're not going to want to click on each of those services individually. So first you need to actually import the module, just like we had the import module MS Online last week. You need to import module AD Sync. And then once that's there, the command for the full sync is start dash AD. It should be AD sync cycle. Yeah. It's called AD sync cycle because I believe the tool before AAD Connect was called AD sync, and I just don't think they ever actually updated that command. So it's AD sync, the name, and then sync cycle. And then we want to do policy type. And there's two policy types. Delta is the Delta sync that I was talking about, where it will just do Delta synchronizations. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to come over here. I'm going to close this and reopen it. And then we see it running the Delta syncs. Now that would have shown up eventually anyway. I just closed it to get it to show up faster. The other one, if you want to do a full sync, the policy type for that is not full. It's initial. That will do a full sync. So I'm going to go ahead and get out of PowerShell and get out of here for now. So taking a look back at 365, we have these users here, but we also have a handful of groups that were created. These are just the on-premise security groups, basically. So, all right, I'm going to say I don't want those to be in Office 365 anymore. So I'm going to go into the Synchronization Service, and I'm going to go to the connectors. You do not ever edit anything on the .onmicrosoft.com connector. You're going to edit the local connector. If you have multiple domains here, then you need to edit the multiple connectors. So you can either double-click it, or I believe you can just right-click on it, and Properties does the same thing. So to configure filtering, we're going to go to Configure Directory Partitions. This is the only domain here, and this is actually the full name if you look in ADSI Edit as well. So to edit filtering, I'm going to go down here and go to Containers. So that MSOL Microsoft Online, I'm not entirely sure why it puts that there. I'm going to go ahead and remove that and put in my actual admin account. And hang on, I think it's actually looking for Alright, I apologize. I need to figure out why it's not. There we go. Okay, so these are the containers here. So what I can do is I only want the O365 users, OU, to actually sync. So I'm going to uncheck the entire domain, and then I'm just going to check off O365 users. Also, one thing I did not mention on the initial setup when you're doing filtering, if you're doing filtering during the installation of AD Connect, you can't uncheck the domain like that and then check off individual items. Unfortunately, you have to just tick whatever you don't want to sync. If the domain itself is unchecked in that setup, it won't let you check off anything else. But I'm going to do that. I only want O365 users to sync. I'm going to hit OK there. And just to confirm, it's still there. I'm going to hit OK. All right. And then I'm going to go back over here, and I'm not going to run these commands individually. I'm going to go into PowerShell and redo a full sync for this one since I had to edit the filtering. And what this is going to do is it's going to go ahead and redo the sync, and then it's going to remove everything that's not in that one OU. Now, if you do this and I'm going to put the information in the description because I don't have it on me right now, but there is a setting within AAD Connect by default that stops deletions, bulk deletions of 500 or more at a time. It's meant to prevent accidental deletions in 365, basically. There is a way to disable that. It's a bit of a long string of PowerShell, so I'm just going to go ahead and put that in the description for you guys so you can see that, and I believe you need the AD Sync module as well to run it. So once again, there's not really all that much I have to do, so I'm going to go and X out of that, and I'm going to bring back up the Office 365 portal. So now, if I go back to my users here, once again, users and active users, it are just these three. This won't ever get deleted. This isn't in a particular OU or anything like that. That gets created by 365. Groups, I'm going to go to my groups again, and this time all my groups are gone because they were not in that OU. They're still on premise, I just don't have a use for them in 365. And because of the way that they were deleted, they don't even show up here. Those users are just gone, basically. And now I can go back to my active users, and other than the fact that this is synced with Active Directory now, this acts the same as any other user account. I can assign it licenses, I can do the same permissions and privileges with the account. It's just an easier method of user management. Now, if you're starting from scratch with 365 and you don't have anything on premise, then this really wouldn't be something that you would do. You would just do a CSV, or you would just go ahead and create the users from scratch. This is basically a setup if you already have something on premise and you don't want to start exporting CSVs, or you don't want to start entering in thousands or even hundreds of users manually. But that's basically it for this video. Next week, I'm going to go over ADFS. And actually, let me show you one other thing while I'm thinking about it. Let me show you how to disable directory synchronization, since I'm going to need to do that anyway, so I can set up ADFS how I want to. So I go here, go to directory synchronization, and I'm going to go to DirSync management. So this ID fix tool is actually a tool that is meant to be there basically in case you want to scan your Active Directory objects, so that way you can see if there's any issues with them before you actually do the synchronization. This is that service account that I mentioned. These are the directory sync errors, and these are basically just some statistics for it. Now this page did before have the option to disable directory synchronization, but if you just give me 1 second here, I'm going to pull up the command at least to show you in PowerShell and in the I'm going to show you how to remove the threshold for the AD Connect deletions. It's like I said, it's set automatically to stop bulk deletions of over 500 to prevent accidental deletions. This we can just do through regular PowerShell. The command, and I'm just going to copy and paste it from where I'm getting it from, because I'm just going to put this in the description. It's a basic command. Get this over here. Disable AD Sync export deletion threshold. These credentials are going to be your Office 365 credentials. And I don't think I ran this as administrator. Let me see something. Okay. And if I want to re-enable it, I simply run enable instead of disable. The only difference with this command is once I put in, give me a second. Once I put in my credentials again, it's actually going to ask me what I want to set the threshold to. I'm just going to put it back to 500. So that's pretty much it for that. Now, as far as disabling DirSync itself. I'm going to try this again. I was trying this before I resumed the video as I was having a bit of an issue with it. Something that shouldn't be an issue, so I do apologize for that, but it's something I may need to address with Microsoft. Because if I run the command to find out the directory sync status, it comes back as true. But if I run the command to set it to false, I'm getting this. I'll tell you right now, I shouldn't get this. I should just get a new line to type down to, and that is what you should be getting as well. Because I can actually set this, even though you can see up here that it's set to true, I can set it to true again, and then that'll work, but I can't set it to false. So I do apologize, that's not working. That should just go down, like I said, to a new line to type. I'm going to address that separately. But that is really about it for this week's video. Next week, providing I get everything sorted out with this, I will be doing ADFS deployment next week. I will already have the servers set up. I'm not going to go over how to set those up. I'm just going to go over basically what roles are needed, and then how to set it up through Azure AD Connect. But that is about it for this week's video. Let me know what you guys think. Share it with your colleagues, share it with your friends, and everything going right with this issue, I will put up another video next week.